The final part of question 3 was to do a cash flow statement, but what you'll see on the exam is that sometimes they only get you to do a part of it, and that could be the case on our SAC as well. So we've got Jerry Dawson owns Slumber City. We're doing a 12-month budget for the year ended 31st of December 2023. We've got these estimates of things that will happen during the year. We've got these account balances, the actual balances at the beginning of the year, and then the estimated balances at the end. And the last thing we're told is the bank balance at the end is expected to be an overdraft of 28,500. So just like other questions, just use your knowledge of the operating activities to drag in the information from the question. So operating activities are the cash flows related to the day-to-day trading of the business and its provision of goods and services. So we're going to ignore anything that's either not cash or not a day-to-day trading activity. And here's the information we've been given. So the first thing is, you want to discard what you don't need to make it simpler. These are things that happen during the year or expected to happen. They're estimates. So we'll need these. But these here are account balances. And account balances, we've got accounts payable, that's a liability. Accounts receivable, that's an asset, and inventory, that's an asset. So they would actually go on the balance sheet. We've already done that question, so we can sort of, discard that info because we don't need it here. So what we're going to do is go through this and see we've got credit sales as the first item. Now, credit sales never go in here. And that's because they're not cash. But what is cash is the money I get from those credit sales. And it will go in here and we'll call it receipts from accounts receivable. The question now is, well, that information is not there. And that's why when you're doing these questions for budgeting, you want to go back and look at the questions I've already done. So I think it was part B said you had to do the accounts receivable ledger, you had to reconstruct it, and the sole reason you had to do it was to find X, which in this case was the estimated cash received from accounts receivable, and we got 684,140. So that is the number I'm going to put in here. Just remember to carry forward. If your answer does not match this and you got a different amount, let's say you got 700,000, but you put that number there because now it matches here. So you didn't get all the marks earlier on in the ledger, but you get carry forward marks here, or consequential marks. Now the other thing is, we collected cash from accounts receivable, but I think it was part C. We had to reconstruct accounts payable to get X here in yellow. And X here was, in this case, how much cash we estimate that we'll pay to accounts payable. So we better put that in too. And again, just match the amount to whatever's in your ledger. You're carrying forward that amount there. And that's the information we did earlier. We also recreated the inventory ledger, but that was to create, to get X, and X was in that case credit purchases of inventory, so that wouldn't go in here. What does go in here is the cash paid to accounts payable. So now we can go back to our info and just make our way down. A discount expense is when we forego cash to an account receivable, so it is literally the definition of not cash, like it's not going to go in here at all. Wages paid will, so we better put that in. We don't know, it doesn't really, so just compared to previous questions we've done, it doesn't say, is there some accrued wages or prepaid or anything like that. Just don't overthink it. It just says wages expense paid, so there it goes. An inventory write-down is an expense, so we put it in the income statement, but it is not cash, so we can ignore that. And the exact same thing with cost of sales. Cost of sales is an expense, but it's not cash. This is the confusing one, and I've just put this in because it was on the exam one year. Other expenses paid. It does say paid. We have no idea what they are, so we're just going to put that there. And then that leaves depreciation, which is an expense, but it is not a cash payment. So the thing now is, normally this is when we would do GST. So first of all, this business only does credit sales, so there will actually be no GST collected because all the GST is coming from accounts receivable, and we would have charged that at the time of the sale, and if we do it again, then we're double counting. Likewise, there will be no cash purchases of inventory, so there's no GST on cash purchases of inventory. Instead, we just repay accounts payable because we buy all our inventory on credit and we don't charge GST again. And then wages does not have GST. Other expenses, this is where it was confusing on the exam. Does it have GST? Does it not? We don't know because we don't know what it is. So if you put GST in as 10% of this, that's okay. I just left it because it didn't explicitly say they did have GST. So see here it says plus GST. If this had said plus GST, I would have put it in. But I think when you're marking this question, if a student puts $4,000 GST in, that's not to be punished. That shows good insight. But I just left it. So I've got used the first column for my numbers. Now I'm going to get my calculator and add these up. Don't forget to put in the net cash flow from operating activities, which is 164,140. So how did we allocate the 4 marks here? I gave 1 mark each for these two numbers because you had to carry them forward from earlier. So I think individually they're worth a mark each. 1 mark for these two because they were just given to you in the question. And if you put the GST in, the GST paid, I included that in there. And then finally, I gave 1 mark for the total. So sometimes the total is worth a mark, sometimes it's not. But if you don't put it, you lose a mark. So I think the main takeaway is always put the total, whether you're going to get a mark or not. It's going to benefit you in the end.